Hey, everybody. I'm Michael Prentke, host of the Boss Bones podcast. And today I'm really excited to have a super special trombonist on today, Mr. Tom Plsek, who I've never met before. This is literally our first time meeting. And um, to be honest, I've heard a lot. Well, I don't know about a lot, but I've definitely heard about you, particularly from my friend Brian. I'm going to just go out there and say that it was Brian Paulding who told me all the terrible stories about you. But seriously, he told me some really incredible things about your work, and I've been so intrigued. And also, I heard I heard about some of what you did from Bob Nesky. He showed me a video from back in the '90s, something that you were involved in. But maybe we can talk about that later. But, anyways, this is all to say I'm super excited to finally meet you here on the internet and the Boss Bones podcast. So thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I guess like just really simple to start. Are you from Boston? And if not, what brought you to Boston?
That's a long story. I'll make it kind of on the short side. I was born in Waco, Texas. Which technically I grew up in a small town just north of there, of about 2,000 people, and I joined the band, and as band players do, you get in the band, and I was good at the trombone. I kind of stumbled into it, and I was just having a blast with it. The reason why is, see, it starts earlier. The reason why is I could do an Air Force fighter plane. I could do a bomber. I could do racing cars, all with my trombone. This is a great sound maker, and I think if you couch that in the the problem now, it sort of explains a few things. But trombone players are often like that.
Hmm.
And so everybody else dropped out of band, and I just kept doing it, and we started a little band um, in about my eighth grade, seventh or eighth grade, I don't remember exactly. And we played music, and we made money playing on weekends. And it was Czech music. I grew up, the name is Plíšek, it's a Czech name. And they had all these dance halls around there, and people played, and they had to have musicians because they wouldn't play recordings. There weren't any down in Texas then of that kind of stuff that much. So I did that, and I said, I'm going to graduate school. And all my teachers said, no, don't go to graduate school or any school in music. Do math or become a doctor or something useful. That, that nailed it right then. I said, I'm going to be in the band, because there was somewhat of a resistance to it. And I was drawn to that. Why? And then I went to Texas Christian University for a degree in music theory. I didn't do it in performance because I thought I don't need a performance teacher to learn things about performance. I need, or I should say, to learn about music. I can get that from the textbooks. And the practicing stuff, the playing stuff, it shows in you haven't been practicing. So I said, well, they're not going to. Have you ever known anybody to get a job, trombonist, just by handing somebody a sheet of paper?
No.
That's so foreign. I said, why would I get a performance in that? So I did music theory, went to the University of Houston for 2 years, degree there, all in music theory. And then out in the world, and I just transitioned to working. I got a gig pretty quickly with the what was that? Still operating with all the Six Flags Over Texas, yeah, and that was a good paying. We were working 6 and 7 days a week, you know, in the summer in Texas being April through November.
What is that? What's Six Flags Over Texas? Is that like a theme park for rides?
It's a theme park. Yep.
Okay, okay, okay.
And it has spread. There's one in Massachusetts, also one in Paris. I don't know if it's still operating, but anyway, just go and play the half-hour show every day. You know,
Mm-hmm.
a good way to get your chops out of shape. You know, if you sit there and you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you don't have time to reload, or maybe that's time only kind of time that you have, because it's like 25 minutes between shows or something like that. But it was working trombonist, so I had to do something to keep the spiritual, artistic side up, and that's when I went to Boston.
So, so you were feeling sort of spiritually, uh, kind of drained by Six Flags, and then Boston somehow called from the ether and said, "This is where
Well,
your spirit can rekindle."
you could work that in there. You just did a good job, it seems, of doing that. Uh, I mean, I didn't totally dislike Six Flags, and they put food on the table. In the meantime, I had gotten uh, married, and didn't have parents to save me, so I played. I did also a lot of freelance work too, orchestral work. I played in a lot of orchestral things, brass choir, big bands. I'm not a jazz player. Um, what do you want a story about that?
Sure, I love one.
Um, when I first came to TCU, I'm sorry, when I first came to Boston, uh, I had done a lot of, as I mentioned, some jazz things, meaning reading big band type of stuff. Um, so I go to the audition and I hear all the and other performances. A lot of the trombone players, and you know what they were doing most of the time. Everybody was playing really hot shot versions of all the jazz standards. And what's uh, what's what's the the classic jazz with weird changes and stuff, fast. Oh, giant steps, yeah, yeah. I knew that would hit a point with you. Um, so I said, I'm standing in line and listening to auditions, and everybody's doing the same thing. It seems I guess, really occurred to me that they're assigned those things. But I didn't. I admired the technology. At first I was a follower of Bill Watrous, and of course, JJ I didn't get to until later because he never came to Texas, so he's still working against that. So I said, I'm going to play trombone with everything except I'm not going to learn to play jazz trombone, traditional jazz trombone, but I like the spirit of the jazz trombonists. And over the years got to be pretty good friends with a lot of them, and they're all great people to be with. And, yeah, and then I was a part of the International Trombone Association for way too many years. Retired from that a couple of years ago. So, so there's a lot of places to, and then I got my main thing is doing experimental music rather than
Right.
guard. I was always trying to see what it could do. In fact, even this concert coming up, whenever we schedule it, I'm gonna use this, but I'm gonna do. I don't want it to sound like a didgeridoo. I don't want it to sound like anything but a didgeridoo.
Hmm.
For the
So,
reason of maybe it's just kind of a real challenge. It's really hard to play a didgeridoo with no sense of or of tonality allowed, or some things like that. Well, you lose a lot of time too, just like you lose a lot of other musicians in other places. The piece and the horn wins. But that's, losses are kind of good as well.
Hmm.
So, so that started. I'm guessing um, you mentioned a piece that I played a long time ago. Do you remember?
Okay, so what I was talking about before was Bob Nesky showed me a video at some art gallery in Boston in the 90s. And um, the reason he was showing us was the reason he showed me the video was there was a guy, and I forget his name regrettably, but he seemed like an incredibly innovative and really interesting guitarist. And he kind of tricked out his guitar into something that was totally far beyond a guitar, and he named it. I forget the name. Who
Uh,
was that?
I know you're talking about John Damien and the Rubber Telly.
That's it. John Damien and the Rubber Telly. And there was a performance of that at this art gallery, and you were a part of it. And it seemed like a wild, wild scene of just people who are really pushing boundaries of what is music and art and performance. And it seemed incredible, like what was happening there. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I don't remember that specific one. That I know pretty sure the church you're talking about, the gallery. I know the four people in the band very well. We're like real brothers type of thing. We latched onto each other as each of us came into the Boston area. And said that's the person I want to do a lot of work with, just to start with. Um, they were all phenomenal musicians. John Damien was considered one of the best students ever to go to Berklee, and then became certainly one of the best players and teachers. He had students loving, because he had you do weird things that made you learn stuff. You just had to go and learn this stuff, and you have to get out on stage and not be shy or anything like that. Um, and then let other people decide, did what you do, was that performance art, or what type of thing. I did get into performance art. I was invited to be in a group called the Mobius, and and that was like it also was given the name with slight different permutation of all um, outsider quartet. So um, we tried everything, you know, and it was such a learning experience just to be around these folks, who took their work very seriously. You know, the bass player John Voight was probably the longest there, and John Damien was next in terms of who started it. They were part of that whole new music thing that was evolving, and then I came on slightly later than that. It was interesting to do because we got people to play with. We didn't care how. There were a lot of things we didn't care about it that other people would, like how they look. Can they play giant steps? John Damien could, and John Voight probably could also do it. And Mark Harvey, the trumpet player, who ultimately was the leader of Aardvark, which
Mm-hmm.
is a band you should look into, and they're still operating. And they've been in operation for about 75 years, Boston's longest going big band.
Hmm.
I was a charter member of it. I played for quite a few years, and then decided to get out of it, just play as needed with them. But boy, in retrospect now, there were some wonderful people there, and who really knew what they were doing, and oh, it's crazy. But go ahead and tell. I'm just wondering what you were I guess that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics of the performance, but I just remember it being a pretty wild and kind of chaotic, slightly chaotic energy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it was beautiful and incredible to see, and it was kind of inspiring. And I don't know if people are still doing that here, like operating similar kinds of experimental music with such kind of vigor and intensity and kind of organized chaos in a way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good way to describe it. That works fine. Uh, there was I see, see if I can think of this. This is one of my favorite stories. No, let me save it for the end. I want to. It was a. I was in had a friend, John Bavicki. If you have real trombone searching techniques, he wrote a prelude for unaccompanied trombone, and virtually no one ever played it, with good reason. Um, but people liked him, and I'll tell you the story anyway. He um, we're sitting in a coffee shop next to the school, myself and this composer, and he said, "Tom, I'm ready to write that piece you asked me for." And I'm thinking, solo trombone piece. People are not ready for that or want that. Um, and the other thing is, I never remember him telling me uh, later that I asked for it. I was sitting there having my cup of coffee, and this guy says, "We're ready to start working on that piece." And I said, "Great, great, let's start soon." And I got to thinking, I didn't ask him for no damn piece, you know. And composers come up with interesting ways, and he's kind of interesting because everything he wrote was traditionally notated and just at the edge of playability. you know so
Mm-hmm.
when I have a composer who writes notes and rhythms, I try to play them. you know um, so anyway, I kind of forgot about him, and then he saw me, and he said, he heard some stuff that I'd done. Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I get a little out of a line here. Uh, he said, "Come over to my house." And so I went over to my house, and he said, "Bring your trombone." And so he said, let's show me what you can do. You know. So I had 3 or 4 alcoholic drinks, and not knowing I was going to be put to this test. And so it starts, and he brings the piece out, and he puts it on the stand in front of me, um, and he says, uh, "Okay, play it." And I looked at the first page or two, and I said, "John, I can't play this." And he says, "Well, you did." And I'm thinking, yeah, but I was drinking and I was improvising. You don't notate that. God, I thought composers knew that. And so I said, okay. And he said, you can change some things if you need to. And it was for trombone, unpitched percussion, and voice, soprano voice. Horrible piece, you know. And I could be like some kind of demon, or not demonist or something, because I heard it. I bet it goes. And sure enough, I opened it up, except missing most of the notes. I can't read that fast, much less play. So he he had one of these things where you alternated playing and singing, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like, and surprisingly it went off pretty good. The 3 of us practiced. I think we put 12 hours in each our individual, at least that. I said, "Why don't you practice this piece?"
Mm-hmm.
And people really put in the time, and it forced another question for me and the ways to think about it. When is a piece no longer worth performing if it's so bad, or at least if you think it's bad? And when did you just go ahead and do it? If you got an orchestra job, you have to go ahead and do it. So it raised some questions. So anyway, we performed it once, and we did a darn good performance of it. It was much better than I thought. I changed some things, which he said it's okay to do. Uh, Even if I got them right, no one would know. But if it's by John Bavicki, I'm trying to think of the name. If you're interested, there's a recording on the Berklee website, and you could put in Bavicki and my name, something on the web, on not the maybe the web, but through the archives, and I found it on there, and I've listened to it a few times. Didn't download it, but maybe I did. So anyway, so the composer, buys off with all this expensive liquor, to get a thing. So I said I'm gonna try to avoid those kinds of situations.
You mean contemporary classical sort of composers avoid those situations?
Well, you make it sound a little too complete. No, there are some of those like that are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so and as you can tell, I'm kind of none of the things I did were completely just me. I like to collaborate with people, and over the years, I've gotten together with different people, performance artists, dancers, and even for crowds outside in the Boston City Square. So,
What were some of those most memorable collaborations?
well, the one I'm using now, Joanne uh, uh, Rice, is a visual artist, and over the years we uh, done we had ideas, and then we'd sit and go to work on it, creating the piece. Um, and then if we liked it, we'd schedule another one. And there were several that were like that. Just took this long live thing. I did first. My first collaborator was my wife, and she sort of still is. She ended up being chair of the piano department at Berklee, and I was chair of the brass department. On that other side, there's that kind of normal part of us. And so, I didn't answer your question, did
I don't know which question.
I? Did you ask a question?
I was just asking about some of the most memorable collaborators that you've worked with.
Oh, well, then the outsider quartet with the four members we did there. Uh, uh, I'm drawing a blank right now, but it will come out. Also, another one, a dancer, a woman named Marjorie Morgan. I don't remember how we connected, but we were going and just doing work, and it wasn't that you do the dance stuff and I'll do the music stuff. He said we both did both. We had no music track to it, and I had to learn how to dance.
Whoa.
And that was a big whoa, yeah. And I got there pretty well. Somebody said to her, where did you find a trombone player who can do movement stuff? And the other one said, how did you find a dancer who can play the trombone?
So you gave her a trombone.
Yeah, no, she broke them faster than I could crack them. But anyway, that was another one.
Hmm.
And there were other people like that, So I would encourage you to do that too. Take one other person and produce a recording with them, or just a performance. It's gonna,
Hmm.
it's really makes you think differently. So
Well, it seems like really making you think differently is a pretty common thread, a common theme through your all of your professional work. Everything, the couple performances I've either seen or heard about really made me think differently about the musical approach. Um, I heard one story about, I think it was a solo performance of yours, and people were seated in a circle, I think maybe facing inwards, and you had disassembled your trombone and put a piece underneath each chair, and something about like army crawling to each piece and sort of quasi assembling the trombone and making sounds. And it was kind of like a sort of almost military or war piece,
was
but pretty intense.
was well, a lot of our stuff we intended it for it to be that way. Not easy to hear, Uh, life in some ways is too easy for most of us, and so I don't know what piece that was, but I may know. Just describe it once more.
Well, I haven't, to be honest, I haven't seen the performance. I just heard about it. My
Yeah,
friend Brian told me about this performance where the audience members were seated in a circle and you disassembled your trombone and
right.
put the various parts underneath each chair, and you were in an army crawl on the floor, crawling to each chair to assemble it.
I think I know the piece that's happening. Um, it let me see if I can get some more neurons in there connecting. The low frequency neurons are the hard ones to remember. I can remember longer words. Um,
Hmm.
it was a piece where I think it involved a calf's liver. I mean,
Wow.
a calf's heart, uh, the real thing. And that had me on the floor. It may have looked. I was creating the universe, so to speak, or our world. It was a raven tail. I'm really much into ravens.
Hmm.
Some of the most amazing creatures on earth. And I went through, and I had a bag, and I can't remember where my trombone was, um, but it came in dark, and this, the little short statements were in the beginning. Blah, 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 blah. I say stuff, and then uh, land was created, and then when our Earth was created, and it went through the various things until it got to humans, and it didn't. In the other part, I'd walk a little bit closer to the stage, and then I was standing, eyes closed. I can't remember where the other. I think the trombones were. I don't remember that all. Um, and so uh, when I got to the last one, the circle was equaling its end, and and at that time there was one spot, and I pulled in the bag and pulled out this calf's heart, and those yellow markers for marking plowing areas on your driveway. You see them,
Uh,
they're
I don't
like
know.
little skinny things that you put into so that the plow guy knows where to plow. They're
Okay.
nice spears, you know. And so just for the various last moment, I stood. It got stopped. There was a poem I was reading for this, the Raven Tale, actually, and uh, they they took all these things and threw them at me one at a time. And I said, okay, throw it at me, look it real, but don't hit me. Or at least don't hit me like on the head or something like that. But don't be, you don't have to worry about it. Throw at my feet if you're worried. So they did this, and it really rattled in this theater. And somewhere in there, I was on the floor, and the whole part of the trigger part of the horn was filled with water and not played until the very last gesture of the piece. I fell down, I think, on the ground and was still saying something, I guess. And then I had to pull the trigger, the water came gushing out and on the stage. And that was the last thing. With the heart stuck in it. The heart had these orange things. Somewhere I have a picture of it. So I forgot how we got to this mess. But,
I was just curious. I heard about this performance. So was this something that you wrote and choreographed and invented, or did somebody else write this?
Joanne Brackeen and myself. No, not Joanne. She's a piano player. Joanne Rice, who's the visual art, who developed all the visual elements of the piece and the movements. She was not a musician. She, in the sense of writing melodies and harmonies and things like that, but she has a real sense. So, and once again, also there was, my wife Stephanie always coming up with some pieces, So I had a real source of wonderful music to work with, wonderful musicians to do this. So I would suggest work with a collaborator. Just go up, say some, and don't look for the information to say for trombone. We can play it too. Do you play much out of your work with the band, or?
Yeah, I'm a freelancer, so I play regularly with a couple of groups and then one-off gigs here and there, and make most of my money through teaching. So that's kind of my regular work.
What do you teach?
I teach right now mostly brass, and most kids are wanting to learn trumpet. So I'm actually teaching mostly trumpet lessons, but I have taught tuba and obviously trombone and euphonium. I've done, improvisation lessons. I've even done a little bit of music history and music theory, arranging, composition. Yeah, and even general music with little kids, doing stuff that's not necessarily instrumental. So I had to be flexible, to survive. I had to try and find work and accommodate myself and learn how to do that kind of work to survive.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. You just have to devote a lot of time and realize that it's not the difficulty of the pieces that make them work. It's the musicality. So I was one of the organizers of the International Trombone Festival. That was going on almost from the beginning, and I got to where I just, I was really amazed by a lot of those players that came there. They were just scary, but I didn't hear the music. I hear a high C sharp, or something like that. And they all started sounding the same. Pull them apart, probably more to my brain problems than yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
What I did the Irish book. I don't think I brought it up here. Yeah, the 20. Oh, Jesus. Here's one of the things I did. You want to flip through it. Notice it doesn't say trombone on it. I don't know if I'm holding.
Traditional slow airs of Ireland.
Yeah.
Does that say Thomas Canaan?
Yep, you got
Thomas
it.
Canaan.
You may have some Irish in you. You said it so properly. We were going on sabbatical to Ireland to live there for 4 months, and my wife was really interested in some of the traditional music, and that. So I didn't want to do that, and I was thinking something that could be different. So I said I'm going to learn some of these on trombone. I don't think anybody has ever played one that I never heard anybody. And they're really beautiful melodies, some of the most beautiful melodies that you'd ever hear. And yet they needed to have the proper amount of improvisation with them. This was melodic improvisation. You could hear 4 singers do it, and there'd be 6 different versions, all musical, and all you within a few notes you would hear the melody, and then you'd have to take it. And look, this thing is virtually unreadable, and I have never seen another one that they probably picked it out of a store. It's just full of mistakes. Let's see if I can get it. But there were melodies in there. Like the one on this side here, Lament for Staker Wallace. Can you see? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Imagine giving somebody that sheet music and say play it. It just it. I mean, if you're playing this in tone, dee ba dee da 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 dee 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 da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee. And I was and my wife were listening to a lot of Irish music when we would go there and on, and you hear it and you look and say, well, what does this have to do with what you just played? And I'd say, well, I got to go figure it out. So we'd head to all the concerts and listen to it. It's just like a jazz tune, looking at it, giving somebody a straight jazz tune and play it. It doesn't sound quite right. What you're doing. But I found probably about 10 so pieces in here. And simple ones like this one, Leg and Love. And these are all written for the Irish pipe, not the British one that you hear on all those days. Yeah, it's a much more interesting information to play. Leg and Love. The Lagan River is a river up north, and so I spent the sabbatical. This has been some years now, working on these, and getting the chance to hear a lot of real real Irish musicians, and not very many Irish trombone players. I never met another one. Well, they must exist somewhere. But I never met them. And I was involved to be part of a performance festival in Ireland, in Galway. And they took at least one musician from each genre: music, performance art, movement, blah, 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 blah. And they gave us the church, one of the churches, for a week. how many, just we is about 10, 12 people in different disciplines. And that was real exciting to work with these Irish folks developing work. And my wife would drop me off in the morning. It was like I was going to work. I had to be there at 10 and often stayed till about 8 or so at night.
So you were collaborating with
We were,
local Galway musicians,
yeah, and
or
some like myself too, who
or multidisciplinary artists, not just musicians.
yeah, and I had a blast. I thought it was so much fun, and I think I did. I'm not sure if I did didgeridoo on that or not, but so
Have you ever connected with the Irish music community here in Boston? Because I know there's a strong scene.
there is not for what I do to cousins.
They don't
I
want to hear the traditional Irish airs on trombone.
no, I play those fairly regularly. I haven't lately due to these other health things. Although I play them, I try to pretty much play some of them every day.
Hmm.
Not I would perform them, I don't know if I have the chops for it or not. As I got older and got this disease in there, the endurance is the one that affects me most now. But yeah, I mean, I've played for them there, and I can't really say that I played for them here.
Hmm.
Most of them lose their identity as an individual. I don't know if that's right, but it's just way more fun to go to Ireland and do the work.
I want to back up a little bit. I was still a little bit unclear. So, what specifically brought you to Boston? Because I know that you were the chair of the brass department at
Yeah, but
Berklee.
yeah, much later. But the thing was, I finished my master's degree, and my wife at the time was not the one I have now. She was working at a hospital, Mass General. I think I don't know if it's Mass General or something. Um, and we made a deal. I would go spend 2 years getting my graduate degree, and then I would be responsible, and she would take over learning an area that she really wants to.
So,
Probably,
you mean you completed your graduate studies in Texas,
yes,
and then she could go work at Mass General?
that's right. I don't know if it was Mass General, but she did lab work, so, but it was in that area, and it seemed to be a pretty good job. And anyway, very shortly after that, we broke up, and
Hmm.
and then I found my current one, and we just hit it right. Like we're supposed to, I think.
And as you said, she's a pianist, right?
She's a pianist, yeah.
So, was that your in to Berklee?
I'm sorry.
Was that your in to Berklee? How did you get involved with Berklee?
We um, I went over to visit the head of the composition department because my degrees were in music theory, you know. Um, so um, that was fine with me. We were going, and I applied for a job. In fact, by the end of the day that I showed up there, I had a job promised. It. I walked in and there's an opening for a full, not a full time, but a part time uh, music theory teacher. You know.
Hmm.
And I said, I'll raise my hand like the semester was starting in the very next week.
Wow.
They were forcing the chair of the composition department at that time, the piano player, to teach these courses. So I said, I'm just out of it. I love to do it. She had a child at the time who needed some money and was a working thing, and she ended up sort of getting it the same way I did. She taught a lot of trombone, a lot of piano, and then we met. The two of us met,
Hmm.
and at composition meetings, the meetings that you love to hate, departmental meetings, and so one thing led to another, and we got married. and been married quite a few years.
Wow. So, um, so you started off teaching music theory, but how did you become the chair of the brass department? I'm no offense. I with all respect for your work, it just seems so as someone who's so firmly in very non-traditional trombone styles, it seems so I guess surprising that they would choose you, elect you to be the chair of the brass department.
Well, here's one thing that I did to address that. Um, um, I tried to keep my Berklee work and my artistic work mostly separate. And
Mm.
I said, I think I need that. I don't need Berklee having any kind of real effect on me. So I had technically a master's degree, so I certainly had the right bill to have or right art things. And and then that quartet that we've been talking about, three of the four of us were associated with Berklee, but we pretty much tried to keep it out of or use it when it's appropriate. So I was generally a good organizer and getting things together, and I would show up and do things. There's a statement sometimes you get 95% of success is showing up or something to that effect. So I think that's really true. She's the same way. She can play. Although she's much more versatile than I am. She can play uh, jazz and classical. I mean, and some of the big ones, the Chopin nocturnes and things like that. And she fills in a lot of places that I don't have. But we just happened to meet at this time. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So you kind of
If I read out what
huh?
I was going to say, don't go to Berklee to find a husband or a wife.
It
Worked,
worked for you though.
worked for me, right? So
Um, so in order to sort of, I guess, would you have been worried that if Berkeley was aware of your sort of exploits, not exploits, but like your creative work and life, do you think that they might have had second thoughts about nominating you as the brass chair?
well, early on, uh, they did that. I did I think it was one of the John Cage pieces. Or a piece that I did spun off of that or so. And the chair of the division at that time called me up the next day and I had to go in and he asked me if I really did these things. They weren't that outlandish. And I said, yeah, I did them. They're in the piece. And he said you shouldn't, embarrassingly to his, he wasn't against it. It was one of the deans that said that kind of music shouldn't be played here. And of course, that just made me really want to do it more, whether I liked it or not.
So there's a pretty strong contrarian streak within you.
So anyway, that's after a week or so, everybody forgot about it, and it was not even a Berklee person. It's somebody from outside the school, which may be worse.
Um, I was wondering, could you maybe talk about your experience of Boston's music and arts scene through time? I don't know when you got here exactly. Maybe the I don't know 80s or 90s or something.
I got here in the 70s,
70s. Okay.
and I honestly don't remember which of those 70s, but yeah. So there was something just starting up then, as far as I could perceive. There was this whole thing, which maybe not best choice, but it's called creative music that was going on. It was primarily the jazz folks who did it, who decided to go into more jazz, um, free jazz type of thing. So there were enough people doing it, and I can't think of the saxophone player that did a lot of free stuff in the early stages. Garzone was different, but yeah, better known than Garzone. Anyway,
Bergonzi?
what's that?
Bergonzi?
That's the other side of the. No, it wasn't Berganzi either. It was a big name. Oh gosh, see this problem. Maybe it'll come to me. Kind of gave it validity,
Hmm.
and then other people started doing it, and it started spreading, and then it spread wide enough to accept me, a classical trombone player. But I loved it, what I was hearing. I didn't even know you could do that. I thought you'd get like a traffic fine or something like that. But and it led to other types of sub things during that time, and the people were just into it. They were into it. That's something they wanted to do, and it was just exciting to do that. And then so many wonderful players that came out. Oh gosh, I should write these names down. And then there was the aardvark, but then a lot of much smaller groups that would just go and play, and then there was still the traditional jazz thing too happening, structure changes and things like that. But all this other stuff started going. We have concerts late into the night, and things like that. So it seemed a natural one for trombone players. George Lewis.
George Lewis, yeah.
I don't know that Berklee ever even. Well, I think we did once. We honored him sometime with an award. But there were a lot of people like that to learn from and to listen to, and of course on all the instruments. I wish I could think of that saxophone player's name. But it was very intense, and there were certain groups. Mark Harvey had his own quartet that became well known, and I want to say well known. I've already forgotten the name of it. So there was people. If you're doing something by yourself, it's maybe it's harder to do than if there are other people doing similar work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what were some of your favorite? Huh?
Let me so I don't forget. I'm not worried about you forgetting. Mark Harvey has written a book about the history of the aardvark jazz ensemble, and that pretty much I'm sorry, he actually expands that to include musicians that maybe didn't play a lot. I was in the band when it started, and then I was in it. So for whatever reason, he gave me a page, and John Voight, the bass player, and John Damian, liked what we were doing. That was one example of people doing things. It was, and it's kind of, I don't know what's happening.
I was wondering if you could maybe share some of your favorite venues that are maybe around still, or maybe not around anymore.
Oh wow, that's a really good question. The one where a lot of the stuff happened, the church on Newbury Street. Church on Newbury Street.
You mean the one in Copley Square, like on the Common? Sorry, not in Copley Square on the corner.
Yeah, I think so. I think that. that's the one I'm trying to remember. But yeah, they did. Mark Harvey was the preacher there. He was an ordained preacher.
Hmm.
He had this stuff going. So his thing with this music, it was really kind of sacred to him. You know, he took it very seriously. And I don't know if you've heard them or not, but
Mm-mm.
I would, if you ever get a chance to. They're not going to be around too much longer because they're old, you know.
You mean Aardvark or Mark Harvey's quartet?
No, I'm sorry. I meant the aardvark. Aardvark.
Mm-hmm.
They're particularly advertised around. Uh, they got an agent who does, which was kind of weird for one of these people, these types of folks who did this, to have somebody legally looking out for them and setting them up. And there's probably a lot of other things too. I probably should go correcting some of the mistakes I've made already.
Mistakes you've made?
But I'm sorry.
You said you made mistakes?
Oh, I must have.
It's fine. Maybe.
If I notice anything, oh, Jesus, I better tell him. You know,
It's fine. If we find any mistakes, we can correct them.
another thing for me um, that certainly helped as a trombone player, but didn't really need my first Cage concert, John Cage, was a piece that was pretty much an hour long, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but the choir on stage was reading from Thoreau's, no, Walden's, and then there was another group led by Cage who played a very slow but intense version of a storm, a thunderstorm. And so you go and gee, something about the TCU School of Music. It's still after me. Um, so so John was recording the playing back, not recording the Thoreau's that section of where the incredible thunderhead came up and started thrashing rain. It was flashing around, and the people were reading on stage, about 15 of them. They were reading the quote, which at first was understandable, but as the thunder got louder and the music got more people singing, it became less and less something you could comprehend and something you couldn't comprehend. And as it was being played, there were people hissing, you know, and booing. This is in Sanders Theater.
So Cage was there in Sanders Theater conducting this piece.
He's been there a number of times.
Hmm.
And so the you know, it's getting to the end of the concert, and the concert ends. This thing that just, you know, the thunderstorm came and then dissipated, and all quietness happened, and it was nice and beautiful. And Cage got a standing ovation. And you might say, well, you said he got a standing ovation earlier, which is true, but he got booing at the same time as some of the congratulations. And I'm sitting there as a theory major, and I'm thinking, wow, I've never heard anything like this. And it was all done by chance elements, of course, as you know. So standing ovation, people booing, and I'm thinking, how can one composer evoke all those responses, that range? I hope someday I'm like 1/10 as that. Go tell some of your students to go out and write a piece and get it standing ovations and not.
Wow. Yeah.
I said, that's powerful music. I want to know more about that music.
Hmm.
Oh, I have one other Cage. You want to hear a Cage story?
I'd love to hear a Cage story.
Uh, um, I forget what was where it was even right now, but um, give me a few seconds before I compile enough of it. I was going to New York and to do performances with John Cage and with Merce Cunningham group. Are you familiar with that?
Sure.
Yeah, good. And so it was a night that we were in New York, and the piece came on, and the piece consisted of the dance company doing about I don't know, maybe 12 minutes, 18 minutes of music of their piece. This is what John said: you come and play, but do this, play this set of music, which was all his music there. And he played it. And one of the side lights here that I still kind of feel a tingle sometimes is when it came time to the solo, the semi-solo piece, once again that my wife did. She wrote it for a stereophone, a trigger with hoses attached to it to go to different, well, to the trigger. Not one was here, one was here. So I had stereo mono, stereo with all, just we didn't have electronics at all. Just did that, and and it came to that solo piece that I'm doing, and I looked up, and Merce Cunningham was doing a solo piece, uh, and in our, even though it wasn't planned, it was purely accidental. Our it came out as uh, like a beautiful, like it was contrived to do that, and you could have taken those things and had you a nice solo piece to use. And so we did it, and I was, wow, what I just played with John Cage. And so uh, so at the concert's end, I'm putting my stuff away, and John had been sitting a little bit on a different part of the court, this area. There's a lot of things that go off on. We could talk about this another time. And 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 he came up and he extended his hand to me, and he said, "Hello, I'm John Cage," just like that. And I said, and I was going to go, "Well, I'm Tom Plsek now." And he said, "Oh, so that's how you pronounce it." And my friend and I just broke up. We just thought it was hilarious that I'm getting on to all of tight, and he just wanted to know how I pronounce my name. That's how, in some ways, the way he was into sound. You know, how many other composers do you know that would do that? That
Yeah.
come up to you, to the crowd, and so that's one of my favorite stories.
That's amazing.
And I got to where I knew him pretty well uh, for a relatively short time. So I've talked to him several times. He's fascinating to talk.
Sure.
He's just one of the nicest people, one of the most creative people, you know. And another John Cage story is he was at the Decordover Museum out in Reston with the installation there. And um, and they had a dinner for him that evening, and so we were invited to the dinner. My wife and I, and we went out and we took our seats, and people were looking around, and there's no John Cage, so people were wondering, and so they did some work. So about this time, John Cage comes in through the kitchen door, with a like this with a tray. And what do you think he had on the tray?
I don't
Anybody?
know.
This is a good John Cage.
Mushrooms or something? I don't know.
You nailed it on the head. Mushrooms. He's a mycologist or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He started serving the people at the table. He
Oh
was
my God.
serving the people who were elected to honor him, and he thought it would be giving them some fresh mushrooms which he picked.
Wow.
So that's, maybe there's some kind of thinking going on through all of this, or something that's helping you get some things. I don't hear that kind of rappery happen anymore.
What?
People, like John would come here and just fit right in. You know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. So I will always treasure those moments.
Yeah, you're lucky that you got to spend some time with him. He was a really remarkable person.
And I didn't push it. I didn't push it. It just so happened. Well, I know. I don't know if you come across the name Malcolm Goldstein, violinist.
No, I don't know him.
He played quite a bit of Cage's music.
Oh, okay.
But he's living up in Montreal, Canada now.
Hmm. Um, Maybe, do you mind telling me about that piece you were mentioning before? You were saying it's kind of the culmination of your life's work.
Okay, it's going to be doing with Joanne Rice, the the woman I've collaborated with over many years, and then a new person, Scott. Scott and what's Scott? I can't think Scott's last name. It's Fester, of course. They go away. So um, we were we were. I won't get too technical in the setup, but we wanted to do a piece. This started this summer, maybe finish it, maybe not. And at the time, um, we're both of us were kind of having problems with the world because this, I don't know, Chiquita, Chiquita. How do you say small cow in Spanish?
In Spanish? Uh,
Vaquita, I think. Vaquita.
vaquita, right?
Vaquita, yeah. And there is this species of uh, the smallest whales in the ocean, whatever that technical name for waves are, animals. Um, and it was the vaquita, and I had been following it. It was discovered in the 1960s or so. There were 567 of them, the best we could count. And the next year, this is what the researchers were doing. The next year, there were something like 18 fewer, whatever that is, didn't return. And then the following year, a similar percentage didn't. So they were going extinct after they had been discovered in just not a long time. It was found out what was happening is this is really easy to fix. There was another species of fish. This is in the Baja California, and that that the secondary fish would grab the other fish and take them underwater until they drowned, because the vaquita are air breathing, and you can hold them in your hands, like a couple of footballs. They're small, weigh about 40-50 pounds, and so they kept dwindling. And as it stands right now, They're probably, best guess, about 40 to, well, about 40 would be generous, maybe 40 to as low as 12 or 15, like that. And so these fish from Mexico would get captured and fed to these other fish. Actually, I don't even think they were fed that much. They wanted the other stuff, which was an aphrodisiac, and still is, I suppose. So we wanted to do a statement. People just wouldn't even acknowledge this. You know, you hit the right whale that's at about 3,000 or so left worldwide. Well, worldwide there's perhaps only 20. Some of the numbers. So we wanted to do a piece that would be directed to that, and so we kept trying things, kept working, and it's still in a process in development. But you feel like hearing a little bit of didgeridoo, the way I play it?
I'd love to hear that if you want to share.
I think. Oh, I bought the wrong. Oh, here it is. I don't want to get into the philosophy of the book too much, but here, this is my main didge. It's a real. It has papers, and I have. On the artistic side is this one. I don't know you
can get the sense, some hand painting, some designs, and some animals on this other didgeridoo.
Australian artwork. The other one, the first that you saw, was the real thing. It was,
You got it in Australia?
No, but it was sent to me from Australia. Former student of mine went to I guess with a band, and he picked this up as a souvenir and brought it. And Stuart Dempster saw it on my wall and said, I should learn to play didgeridoo, because he said this is really a good one. So, you know what? Maybe I have a recording of it too. It's probably luckier. So the theory here is I can do anything I want on the didgeridoo except make it sound like a didgeridoo.
Okay.
I'll step. So that's pretty didgeridoo-ish.
Right.
Yeah, very. Okay, now, what if I start and try to play that, but make it so that I can't do it? I can't. If it starts to get into something like that, you got to change it. So that sounds sufficiently unlike a didgeridoo.
For sure. I don't think I would take that for a didgeridoo if I heard that.
So it's been, I take notes when I discover something, and then go work on it. Get as high as I could in those little, we have all done it in some ways. and it's fun, and it's really hard to hold them, to get them in their place. That's some of the sounds that are going to be in this piece. In fact, the, you saw this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to use, I have 5 of them. And I may not be able to hold this up. And I may not be able to play this one. I know this already. This is so low that I have to work down to it. But that may or may not have sounded like a good thing. Part of it is recognizing their culture and not trying to profit from it and pose it as my own. I said, well, I'll fix that. I'll just not play from the ditch.
Sorry, Tom. It's a little bit hard to hear you. Can you say that again a little bit closer to the computer?
Yeah. That one's hard enough to play straight. You'll probably never hear that kind of didgeridoo playing at a didgeridoo place. You'd hear it playing the low things in there, not the high stuff in there. So I mean, they evolve. Now these pieces, which are like the last one I did was a minute long, will be fed either at the performance or before the performance by Scott Fessler. He's like one of those tech geniuses that can put all these things together and get the Zoom thing happening so that we can use that. So that's our technology thing. So those get tied together when that happens.
So you're collaborating with a couple of other people, right?
Yeah. Joanne Rice is one. She's the visual. I don't have anything of hers with me. If I could get something too, really.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe later. Do you have a venue and a date for this?
No, not yet. Well, we do. I just want to confirm a few things.
Okay. Well, I can let listeners know through my channels. You know, I can share the information if you'd like.
Yeah. It's probably early June. We had.
You mean early July?
Yeah. Yes. That's what John Cage thinks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can have a lot more to say about that and how and if I can, I'll get Joanne Rice to come, and she does amazing, beautiful video stuff. That does the similar thing to the trombones and the electronics. Takes things and tears them apart. You know, like sort of like we're going through our country and earth. We also did a piece about birds. We got from the Macaulay Library for $25 at Cornell. We got on CD the entire library of bird sounds. Macaulay Library. It was like 1,500 bird sounds. And we used it in a piece, and we simply let it play and get louder and louder and just turn the volume up. So we had one bird chirping another bird, and by the end you had as many as your computer can hold, which was about a lot more than we ever imagined. So the sound of the bird sounds was so thick it actually forced some people to leave. But we didn't stay there more than 5 minutes. I, that's another one of my things to try to deal with hearing loss because of loud music.
Sure.
If you ever want me to come in and do a talk about that, I haven't been doing it because I also, in all that we talked about, I was in one of the college's music teachers. What's the word I want? You know, Steph? The study of science of sound. Acoustics, yeah. How can I
Mm.
see? It's just so weird what happens in there. Acoustics. I do a lot of. I have done a lot in acoustics. So,
Hmm.
but well, we can.
What got you interested in acoustics?
There was always a science type of thing as part of my teaching, and I was. A lot of people thought I was going to be a scientist. You know, study math and science. I won the math, the algebra, the mathematics law. I think it went so far at the school that I was going to. Forgot every bit of it by now. But I think I just like doing it. And I think people should take responsibility for their lives, you know, and realize what's happening unless they had the tools needed. And it's so easy to get now, so easy online.
Sure. Do you feel like your study and understanding of acoustics informed your trombone practice?
It must have. Yeah, I work with those together, but you almost don't need to. The work with acoustics is general, and the trombone is one example of it. But absolutely, I started using it in my teaching, trying to get the students to understand why is this happening? Why is this note out of tune? Why can't you hear that? This it just goes on and on
Wow.
and it's fun. Musicians are a lot of fun to be around too. You know, I know that sounds weird, but they really go for it. This is where I heard about the vaquita
Where?
at one of these conferences, acoustics conferences. I was going down the hall and looked at what starts in 3 minutes, and this presentation on the vaquita in the Baja. And I said, well, I wonder what that is. You know, it turned out they presented it as that. uh, wow. Uh, the teachers started talking about what. Oh, it's not coming out now. He said how. So the problem was we had to have underwater microphones that could record and stay underwater for a month at a time. And we also had to have one that would record what it's hearing and would also, and I'm making up these numbers approximately, but we have these other ones uh, that, that that specified where the location is. You had a similar thing. It was a microphone that had to survive underwater under quite a bit of pressure too. And I said, well, man, that's interesting. And I looked at them and held them. They're really enormous, you know. And I'm thinking, wow, why would you need that? And so I looked a little bit more into the paper, and it was to measure the vaquita. Um, and they're like, for example, if you're familiar with the way sound works, our upper end of hearing is about 8K, depending on your age, so 8,000 hertz or so. And this goes up to about uh, over 500,000 K. So
Whoa.
you can't use a normal microphone and take your SM88 or 87 and put it in there and turn the water on. Uh, and just measuring the existence of these creatures, somehow something about that just struck me as really kind of weird. Here's all the work being done to measure that, and it seems to have no effect at all. But let's hope it does. They've tried all the typical things, trying to capture the last remaining people of some creature and rescuing it. It looks like they tried. None of that worked. If you go on the web, just look for vaquita, you'll find more than you want to know.
Hmm.
There's recordings of it. There's histories of it. And what's being done, how they failed. But it's a sad story.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about one other performance, which I heard about when you went to the Quincy Quarries, and I think it was at sunrise, and you went to the top of the quarry and maybe played something, and then uh, ended the performance by throwing your trombone down into the quarry.
Okay, yeah, I have a picture. I just want to see if I can. I'm not used to going there from here. Um, I'll send it later, a letter. Yeah, there's a picture of me um, standing, throwing my trombone off about a 30-foot cliff, and so um, this was all planned. I went out and I started playing on this cliff, and just playing more and more and more and more and more and more and more intense, and going like this crazy, and at one point the trombonist reached over and exchanged his good horn for his not so good horn. And there was a big rock ledge that he stuck it there and he pulled it out and then went on playing. So the audience didn't see anything unusual about that. And I bet you all of us have experienced this. We get to the end of a performance, certain performance, and you want to throw the like, it was a great time to do that, throw tickets. Come on, really. And so I'm going and I go, and I throw it off and it goes, and it settles absolutely 180 degrees and hits, and we got one picture of it. And I'll find it. I'll get you some information to it. And if you I bet if you go to my computer or to your computer and type just Tom ORG .org, Tom T Plsek. Sure, it's a real simple website to get into, and I saw it just before walking in here.
I'm sure I can find it, or you can send it to me later.
Yeah, I found if I typed my name with or without the accent in there, you'll get way more than you wanted, probably.
If you type your name without the accent, you'll get more.
You might get a slightly different result.
Hmm.
It just whatever it takes. They've got to put it the first of everything. But that was very cathartic. Is that the right word?
Sure.
Yeah, it helped.
I can relate. I feel like sometimes I wish I had a spare beater trombone and I could just smash it at the end of a performance.
You find when your local music store is having their end of the year band from Muse Ed trombones, you can go pick one up for like $25, maybe less.
I bought like 3 or 4, knowing there are pieces I'm going to be playing that need me to throw out the trombone. I also did it at the Czech embassy in Washington. Where I got in trouble for some of those.
Wait, you did a performance at the Czech embassy in Washington,
Yeah,
and
just
you destroyed a trombone there.
I destroyed the trombone, and this guy got very upset. He was, I said, "Listen, it wasn't that good. The audience couldn't tell the difference between the real one and the non-real one." And so, uh, just did it. And I'm sure. Oh, well, and plus it was part of a series of pieces. That's why it was. It wasn't part of the piece, but it was part of some other pieces that we did. A number of us from the Mobius Artist Group went over. I got it smashed the trombone.
Wow.
Oh, it's worth it. I mean, literally, I paid $4 or $5 for each of these trombones. I can't hear you now.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Oh, like you were moving.
I was just nodding my head.
Yeah. So I should probably get going. I think I have another thing at 4. So.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'm super grateful to have, finally gotten to meet you. I've been hearing about you for years, and it's really a pleasure to have a little bit of time to talk and you sharing some of your history and your stories and it's your inspirations. It's very inspiring to hear about how we can think about music and the world differently and how we can relate to things differently and be inspired by each other and by people close to what we do and people who are far from what we do and be inspired by everything from vaquita whales to dancers to whatever. So it's really a pleasure to talk. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you perform sometime soon. Let me know when your piece is performing and I'll try and make it.
I will.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Comments, questions, send me an email at bossbonespodcast@gmail.com. That's BOSBONES podcast@gmail.com. Or follow me on Instagram, YouTube, or Spotify. For more about Tom, you can visit www.tomplsek.com. That's TOMPLSEK.com. Trombone Icon by Gregory Montigny from thenounproject.com. Special thanks to Celine and Jeffrey. The Boss Bones theme was written and recorded by yours truly, Michael Prentke. Again, please follow at Boss Bones on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, or visit at michaelprentke.com/bossbones. Thanks for listening. See you next time.